Bank refuses loan to old man. The next day, they learn he's a billionaire veteran. The morning sun cast long shadows across the polished marble floor of First National Bank as Arthur Grant pushed through the heavy glass doors. The hustle and bustle of the busy downtown branch enveloped him, a stark contrast to the quiet dignity of his bearing. At 78, Arthur moved with the careful precision of a man who had seen much in life, his gait slightly favoring his left leg, a reminder of sacrifices made long ago. His well-worn tweed coat and neatly pressed slacks spoke of a man who valued practicality over ostentation. A small American flag pin adorned his lapel, a subtle nod to his years of military service. As he made his way across the lobby, a few patrons glanced his way, their eyes quickly sliding past what they perceived as just another elderly gentleman going about his business. At the customer service desk, a young woman with a bright smile and even brighter future greeted him. "Good morning, sir. How can I help you today?" "Good morning," Arthur replied, his voice soft but clear. "I'd like to speak with someone about a small business loan, please." The woman nodded, her fingers flying across her keyboard. "Certainly, Mr. Grant, Arthur Grant." "Thank you, Mr. Grant. Let me see who's available." After a moment, she looked up. "Lily Harper, one of our loan officers, can see you now. She's in office 3 dows, just down that hallway." Arthur thanked her and made his way to the indicated office. As he walked, he couldn't help but notice the sleek, modern decor of the bank, all glass and chrome, a far cry from the austere institutions of his youth. It spoke of progress, of a world moving ever forward, but at what cost, he wondered. Lily Harper's office was a microcosm of the bank itself, efficient, streamlined, and utterly impersonal. The young woman behind the desk rose as Arthur entered, her crisp suit and perfectly coiffed hair a stark contrast to his modest appearance. "Mr. Grant, I'm Lily Harper. Please, have a seat." Her smile was professional, but her eyes were already darting to the clock on the wall. Another client, another quota to meet. Arthur settled into the chair across from her, his movements deliberate and unhurried. "Thank you for seeing me. Ms. Harper, I appreciate your time." Lily's fingers hovered over her keyboard, ready to input data. "Of course. Now, how can I help you today?" "I'm here to inquire about a small business loan," Arthur began, his tone measured. "I'm looking to fund a community center for veterans in our area. It's a project that's very close to my heart." Lily's eyebrows rose slightly. She had been expecting a request for a personal loan or perhaps a mortgage refinancing, the usual fare for clients of Arthur's apparent demographic. A business loan was unexpected. "I see," she said, her tone carefully neutral. "Can you tell me a bit more about this project? What kind of funding are you looking for?" As Arthur began to explain his vision, a center that would provide resources, support, and a sense of community for veterans struggling to reintegrate into civilian life, Lily found her attention wandering. Her mind was already racing ahead to her next appointment, a meeting with a promising tech startup that could bring significant business to the bank. "And so, we believe this center could make a real difference in the lives of those who have served our country," Arthur concluded, his eyes alight with passion for the project. Lily nodded, her fingers tapping a rapid rhythm on her keyboard. "That sounds like a very noble cause, Mr. Grant. Now, let's talk about your financials. What assets do you have that could serve as collateral for this loan?" Arthur's expression faltered slightly. "Well, I live off my military pension, which is modest but stable. I own my home outright, though it's not a large property. The loan wouldn't be for a significant amount, just enough to get the center off the ground." Lily's heart sank. She had suspected as much from Arthur's appearance, but hearing it confirmed made her job both easier and more uncomfortable. "I see. And do you have any business experience? Any track record of managing similar projects?" Arthur shook his head. "Not formally, no. But I've been involved in veteran support groups for years, and I've seen firsthand the need for a place like this." Lily sighed inwardly. On paper, Arthur was far from an ideal loan candidate. His passion was evident, but passion didn't pay back loans or satisfy the bank's rigorous approval criteria. "Mr. Grant," she began, her tone taking on a note of finality, "I appreciate your dedication to this cause. However, I'm afraid that based on the information you've provided, we won't be able to approve a loan for this project at this time. Without significant collateral or a proven business track record, it's simply too risky for the bank." Arthur's shoulders sagged almost imperceptibly, but his voice remained steady. "I understand. Thank you for your time, Ms. Harper." As he rose to leave, Lily felt a twinge of guilt. She added, almost as an afterthought, "You might want to look into grants or crowdfunding options. Those might be more suitable for a project like this." Arthur nodded, a small, sad smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "I'll consider that. Thank you again." As the door closed behind him, Lily was already turning her attention to her computer screen, Arthur Grant and his veterans a center, fading from her mind like a half-remembered dream. She had quotas to meet, after all, and the day was young. Out in the lobby, Arthur paused for a moment, his hand resting on the handle of the glass door. He looked back at the bustling bank, at the young professionals in their smart suits, at the shiny brochures promising financial success and security. For a brief moment, a look of profound disappointment crossed his weathered features. Then, squaring his shoulders, Arthur Grant stepped out into the sunlight. The door swung shut behind him, the soft whoosh of air conditioning giving way to the sounds of the city street. As he made his way down the sidewalk, his limp barely noticeable, Arthur's mind was already turning to other possibilities, other ways to bring his dream to life. The First National Bank stood tall and gleaming in the morning sun, its windows reflecting the busy world around it. But for all its grandeur, it had failed to see the true wealth that had just walked out its doors. A wealth measured not in dollars and cents, but in courage, compassion, and an unwavering commitment to those who had given so much for their country. As Arthur disappeared into the crowd, the day continued on, the rhythm of the city unbroken. But a seed had been planted, one that would soon grow into a story of misjudgment, redemption, and the profound impact of looking beyond appearances to see the true worth of a person. The key turned in the lock with a familiar creak, and Arthur Grant stepped into the modest home he'd called his own for the past 4 decades. The fading afternoon light filtered through lace curtains, casting intricate shadows across the well-worn furniture. Arthur hung his coat on the rack by the door, his movements slow and deliberate, the weight of the day's disappointment settling heavily on his shoulders. As he made his way to the kitchen, his eyes swept over the living room walls, adorned with faded photographs and mementos of a life richly lived. There was the photo of his unit in Vietnam, young faces frozen in time, some of whom never made it home. Next to it, a more recent picture of Arthur surrounded by fellow veterans at a local support group meeting, their smiles testament to the bonds forged in shared experiences. In the kitchen, Arthur filled the kettle and set it on the stove, the routine motions providing a small comfort. As he waited for the water to boil, he eased himself into a chair at the small table by the window. Before him lay a stack of papers, blueprints, and sketches, the physical manifestation of his dream for the Veterans Community Center. Arthur's fingers traced the lines of the proposed building, his mind's eye filling in the details. He could see it so clearly, a place of warmth and welcome, where veterans could find support, resources, and most importantly, a sense of belonging, a haven for those struggling to find their place in a world that often seemed to have moved on without them. The whistle of the kettle pulled Arthur from his reverie. As he prepared his tea, Earl Grey, a habit picked up during a deployment in England years ago, his thoughts drifted back to the young loan officer at the bank. Her dismissal of his project had stung, not just because of the setback to his plans, but because of what it represented. Settling back at the table, cup in hand, Arthur allowed his mind to wander to darker places. He thought of his friends, fellow veterans who hadn't been as fortunate as he had in adjusting to civilian life. Men and women who had given everything for their country, only to find themselves struggling with PTSD, homelessness, or addiction. The community center wasn't just a project for Arthur, it was a mission, a way to honor those who hadn't made it home and to support those still fighting battles long after leaving the battlefield. Arthur's gaze fell on a small, unassuming box tucked away on a shelf. Rising with a soft grunt, he retrieved it and brought it back to the table. Inside lay his medals, tangible reminders of his service and sacrifice. The purple heart gleamed dully in the fading light, a testament to wounds both seen and unseen. As he held the medal, memories flooded back, the searing pain of the injury, the chaos of the battlefield, the faces of the men he'd served with. But more than that, he remembered the camaraderie, the unbreakable bonds formed in the crucible of war. It was that sense of brotherhood, of belonging, that he wanted to recreate with the community center. Setting the medal aside, Arthur turned his attention back to the papers before him. The bank's rejection was a setback, certainly, but he'd faced worse odds before. With renewed determination, he began to draft letters to local businesses and organizations, outlining his vision for the center and appealing for support. As the evening wore on, Arthur's kitchen table became a command center of sorts. Maps of the local area were spread out, dotted with markers indicating potential allies in his cause. Lists of resources, both material and human, grew steadily. Ideas for fundraising events and awareness campaigns took shape on notepads. Throughout it all, Arthur's resolve never wavered. He knew the need was real. He saw it in the eyes of his fellow veterans at support group meetings, heard it in the stories shared over coffee at the local diner. The community center wasn't just a building. It was a lifeline, a beacon of hope for those who had given so much and asked for so little in return. As the clock on the wall chimed midnight, Arthur leaned back in his chair, surveying the fruits of his evening's labor. The rejection from the bank, while disappointing, had lit a fire within him. It reminded him of the obstacles he'd overcome in his military career, of the times when sheer determination and the support of his comrades had carried him through seemingly impossible situations. Rising from the table, Arthur made his way to the bedroom, his steps a little lighter than they had been earlier in the day. As he prepared for bed, his mind was already racing with plans for the next day, people to call, connections to make, avenues to explore. Lying in bed, Arthur's thoughts drifted to the young loan officer at the bank. He harbored no ill will towards her. In fact, he felt a twinge of sadness. In her rush to judgment, in her focus on numbers and quotas, she had missed an opportunity to be part of something truly meaningful. But perhaps, Arthur mused, that was a lesson she needed to learn on her own. As sleep began to claim him, Arthur's last thoughts were not of frustration or defeat, but of hope. He had faced greater challenges than this and emerged victorious. With the support of his community and the strength of his conviction, he knew that the Veterans Center would become a reality. In the quiet of the night, as the rest of the world slumbered, the seeds of change were already taking root. Arthur Grant may have left the bank empty-handed, but he was far from defeated. In his modest home, surrounded by memories of battles fought and comrades lost, a new campaign was being waged, one that would touch lives, heal wounds, and remind a community of the true meaning of service and sacrifice. As the first light of dawn began to paint the sky, Arthur's dreams were filled with visions of a future where no veteran would have to face their struggles alone. And though he didn't know it yet, his unwavering commitment was about to set in motion a chain of events that would change not just his life, but the lives of countless others in ways he could scarcely imagine. The sleek, modern office of Michael Stevens, CEO of First National Bank, stood in stark contrast to Arthur Grant's modest home. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city skyline, a visual representation of the heights to which Michael aspired to take the bank. The early morning sun glinted off the polished surface of his expansive desk, where projections and reports were neatly arranged, each one a stepping stone on the path to greater profits and market dominance. Michael stood before a large touchscreen display, swiping through charts and graphs with the practiced ease of a man accustomed to having the world at his fingertips. Each slide told a story of growth, of expansion, of a financial institution poised to redefine the banking landscape. As you can see, Michael addressed the group of executives seated around the conference table, his voice brimming with confidence. Our third quarter projections are exceeding expectations. The new high-yield investment products are attracting significant interest from our top-tier clients, and the planned expansion into the Asian markets is proceeding ahead of schedule. Heads nodded approvingly around the table. These were the metrics that mattered: profit margins, market share, asset growth. In this room, success was measured in percentages and dollar signs, in acquisitions and mergers. Now, Michael continued, his tone taking on an edge of excitement, let's discuss our plans for the new downtown branch. With a flourish, he brought up a 3D rendering of a gleaming glass and steel structure. This isn't just going to be a bank, it's going to be a statement, a testament to our vision of banking for the 21st century. As Michael delved into the details of the new branch, its cutting-edge technology, its focus on high-net-worth clients, its potential to revolutionize the customer experience, the executives leaned in, caught up in the allure of progress and innovation, his voice carrying the weight of authority. In today's market, we can't afford to waste time on small, unprofitable ventures. Our focus must be on high-value clients, on innovative products that set us apart from the competition. That's how we'll secure our place at the top. The meeting adjourned, and the executives filed out, energized by the vision of a future where First National Bank stood head and shoulders above its rivals. Michael remained in the conference room, savoring the moment. This was what he lived for: the thrill of the chase, the satisfaction of seeing his ambitions take shape. A knock at the door interrupted his reverie. "Come in," he called, turning to see Lily Harper, the young loan officer, enter the room. "Mr. Stevens," Lily began, her posture straight, her voice eager to please. "I wanted to update you on the Goldstein account. We've successfully negotiated the terms of their new commercial real estate venture. It's a significant deal that should boost our portfolio considerably this quarter." Michael's eyes lit up with interest. "Excellent work, Lily. This is exactly the kind of initiative we need. Tell me more about the details." Lily launched into an explanation of the deal, her words flowing with the practiced ease of someone who had rehearsed this moment countless times in her mind. As she spoke, Michael nodded approvingly, seeing in Lily a reflection of his own ambition and drive. "You've done well, Lily," Michael said as she concluded her report. "This kind of performance is what sets us apart from the competition. Keep this up, and you'll go far in this organization." Lily beamed at the praise, her chest swelling with pride. "Thank you, Mr. Stevens. I'm committed to bringing in high-value clients and expanding our portfolio. Speaking of which, I've been cultivating a relationship with Nexus Technologies. They're a promising tech startup that's generating a lot of buzz in the industry. I believe we have a real opportunity to get in on the ground floor with them." Michael leaned back in his chair, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Now that's the kind of forward thinking we need, Lily. Set up a meeting with their CFO. I want to be personally involved in this one." As Lily nodded eagerly, making a note in her tablet, Michael's mind was already racing ahead, envisioning the potential windfall from partnering with a hot new tech company. This was the future of banking, identifying emerging players, fostering relationships with innovative startups, and positioning the bank at the forefront of technological advancement. "Is there anything else on your radar, Lily?" Michael asked, his tone encouraging. Lily hesitated for a moment, her mind flicking briefly to her interaction with Arthur Grant the day before. But she quickly dismissed the thought. That wasn't the kind of opportunity Michael was looking for. Instead, she focused on what she knew would impress her boss. "Actually, yes," she said, her confidence growing. "I've been researching the emerging cryptocurrency market. I think there's potential for us to develop a suite of products catering to high-net-worth individuals looking to diversify their portfolios with digital assets." Michael's eyebrows rose with interest. "Cryptocurrency, you say? That's a volatile market, but potentially very lucrative. Draft a proposal, and we'll discuss it further. This could be a game changer for us." As Lily left the office, practically floating on air from the praise and encouragement, Michael turned back to the window, gazing out at the city below. In his mind's eye, He could see First National Bank's influence spreading, its tendrils reaching into every corner of the financial world. He thought about the upcoming board meeting, where he would present his vision for the bank's future. The charts and graphs were impressive, certainly, but it was more than that. Michael saw himself as a visionary. Michael's office buzzed with activity. Meetings followed one after another, each focused on a different aspect of the bank's expansion plans. There were discussions about artificial intelligence in risk assessment, debates about the potential of blockchain technology in international transactions, and strategizing sessions on how to attract more ultra-high net worth clients. In all of these conversations, the underlying theme remained the same: growth, innovation, and profitability above all else. The human element of banking, the idea of the bank as a pillar of the community, supporting local initiatives and fostering grassroots development, was conspicuously absent. As evening fell and the office began to empty, Michael remained at his desk, poring over the latest market analyses. In the soft glow of his desk lamp, surrounded by the trappings of corporate success, he felt a sense of satisfaction. This was his domain, his empire, and he was steering it towards a future of unparalleled success. Little did Michael know that across town, in a modest home filled with memories of service and sacrifice, forces were at work that would soon challenge his notion of success and force him to reconsider the true purpose of the institution he led. As the city lights began to twinkle in the gathering dusk, two very different worlds, that of Arthur Grant and Michael Stevens, were on a collision course. The coming days would bring revelations that would shake the foundations of First National Bank and force its leaders to confront the consequences of their single-minded pursuit of profit at the expense of community and compassion. The stage was set for a clash of values, a confrontation between the old-fashioned ideals of service and the modern drive for corporate success. And in the balance hung not just the fate of a veterans' community center, but the very soul of an institution that had lost sight of its roots in the community it was meant to serve. The morning sun had barely crested the horizon when Michael Stevens' phone buzzed insistently on his nightstand. Groggily, he reached for it, his mind still foggy with sleep. The caller ID jolted him awake. Henry Walsh, one of the bank's largest investors and a titan in the business world. "Henry," Michael answered, his voice instantly alert despite the early hour. "You'll never guess who I sat next to at the Philanthropist's Gala." Michael's mind raced, trying to recall if there had been any notable events he should have attended. "I'm all ears, Henry." "Arthur Grant," Henry said, pausing for effect. "Ring any bells?" Michael frowned, the name tickling at the edges of his memory. "Grant, I'm not sure I—" "Oh, come now, Michael," Henry chuckled. "Surely you know Arthur Grant, billionaire philanthropist, war hero. The man's been flying under the radar for years, but he's got his fingers in more pies than you can count." Michael's frown deepened. He prided himself on knowing every player in the financial world, every potential high-value client. How had this Arthur Grant slipped past his radar? "I'm afraid you've got me at a disadvantage, Henry," Michael admitted, his curiosity piqued. "Tell me more about this mystery billionaire." As Henry launched into a detailed account of Arthur Grant's accomplishments, his savvy investments in real estate and tech, his generous funding of scholarships and veterans programs, his quiet but significant influence in political circles, Michael felt a growing sense of excitement. Here was a potential client that could take First National Bank to new heights. "And you know what's really interesting, Michael?" Henry was saying, his voice laden with meaning. "Arthur mentioned he'd recently approached a bank about funding a new project, a community center for veterans, if I recall correctly." Michael's blood ran cold. A memory surfaced, a brief mention in yesterday's report about an elderly gentleman seeking a loan for a veterans project. He had dismissed it without a second thought. "Henry," Michael said, his voice carefully controlled. "You wouldn't happen to know which bank Arthur approached, would you?" There was a pause on the line, and Michael could almost hear the smirk in Henry's voice when he replied, "Why, I believe it was your bank, Michael. First National, wasn't it?" The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Michael gripped the edge of his desk, his mind reeling. "Thank you for the information, Henry," he managed to say, his voice sounding distant to his own ears. "Or I'll look into it right away." As the call ended, Michael stood frozen, the magnitude of the missed opportunity crashing over him like a tidal wave. Arthur Grant, billionaire philanthropist and potential game-changing client, had walked into his bank and been turned away. With trembling fingers, Michael dialed his assistant. "Get me everything we have on Arthur Grant," he barked. "And I mean everything. I want to know about every penny he's ever spent, every cause he's ever supported, and find out who handled his loan application yesterday. I want them in my office within the hour." As he ended the call, Michael's mind was already racing, formulating damage control strategies. This wasn't just a missed opportunity, it was a potential PR nightmare. If word got out that First National Bank had dismissed a decorated war hero and renowned philanthropist, Michael shuddered at the thought. He had built his career, his entire vision for the bank, on identifying and cultivating high-value clients. How had they missed this? How had Arthur Grant, with his billions and his influence, been overlooked? As he hurriedly dressed for the day, Michael's thoughts turned to the community center project. It was clear now that this wasn't just some small-time, unprofitable venture. With Arthur Grant's name attached to it, it could be a golden opportunity for the bank to showcase its commitment to community service and veteran support. By the time Michael strode into his office, the wheels were already in motion. His assistant had compiled a preliminary dossier on Arthur Grant, and the loan officer responsible for handling his application, Lily Harper, he now remembered, was nervously waiting outside his office. Michael paused at his desk, taking a deep breath to center himself. The next few hours would be crucial. He needed to turn this situation around, to find a way to not only salvage the bank's relationship with Arthur Grant, but to leverage it into a major win for First National. As he prepared to call Lily into his office, Michael couldn't shake a nagging feeling of discomfort. It wasn't just the potential loss of a valuable client that bothered him. There was something else, a sense that in their relentless pursuit of growth and profit, they had lost sight of something important. The image of Arthur Grant, war hero, billionaire, philanthropist, walking into the bank unrecognized and walking out rejected, kept replaying in Michael's mind. It was a stark reminder that appearances could be deceiving, that true wealth and value weren't always reflected in tailored suits and flashy portfolios. For the first time in years, Michael Stevens found himself questioning the metrics by which he measured success. As he steeled himself for the difficult conversations ahead, he couldn't help but wonder, in their race to the top, what else had they overlooked? What other opportunities had slipped through their fingers because they were too focused on the bottom line? The revelation of Arthur Grant's true identity wasn't just a wake-up call about a missed business opportunity. It was the first crack in the foundation of Michael's carefully constructed worldview, a glimpse into a different way of measuring worth and success. As Lily Harper timidly entered his office, Michael realized that the coming days would require more than just damage control. They would demand a fundamental reevaluation of the bank's priorities and perhaps of his own values as a leader. The story of Arthur Grant and his Veterans Community Center was far from over. In fact, it was about to shake the very foundations of First National Bank, forcing its leaders to confront hard truths about the true cost of their success and the real meaning of community banking. The tension in Michael Stevens' office was palpable as Lily Harper sank into the chair across from his desk. The young loan officer's usual confident demeanor had evaporated, replaced by a nervous energy that manifested in her fidgeting hands and darting eyes. Michael took a deep breath, centering himself before speaking. "Lily," he began, his tone carefully measured, "I need you to walk me through your interaction with Arthur Grant yesterday. Every detail, no matter how small." Lily's brow furrowed in confusion. "Arthur Grant? I'm sorry, Mr. Stevens, but I don't recall." "The elderly gentleman," Michael interrupted, a hint of impatience creeping into his voice. "The one who came in about a loan for a veterans' community center." Recognition dawned on Lily's face, quickly followed by a flash of embarrassment. "Oh, yes, I remember now. But, Mr. Stevens, I don't understand. He didn't meet our criteria for..." Michael held up a hand, silencing her. Lily, the man you turned away yesterday is Arthur Grant, billionaire philanthropist and decorated war hero. He's one of the most influential figures in the business world, and we just showed him the door. The color drained from Lily's face as the implications of Michael's words sank in. I had no idea, she stammered. He didn't look like... he didn't say anything about... That's precisely the problem, Michael said, leaning forward. We judged based on appearances and failed to do our due diligence. Now, we're in damage control mode. As Lily sat in stunned silence, Michael pressed the intercom on his desk. Sarah, please ask the senior management team to join us immediately. And get PR in here as well. Within minutes, the office was filled with the bank's top executives, all wearing expressions of concern and confusion. Michael quickly brought them up to speed on the situation, watching as shock and dismay spread across their faces. Ladies and gentlemen, Michael addressed the group, his voice grave, we're facing a potential crisis here. Not only have we missed out on a significant business opportunity, but we've also risked damaging our reputation by dismissing a respected philanthropist and veteran. We need to act fast to rectify this situation. The room erupted into a flurry of suggestions and questions. The head of PR, a sharp-eyed woman named Rachel, spoke up. We need to craft a formal apology immediately, his mind already racing ahead. But let's take it a step further. I want a comprehensive proposal for a veterans support initiative, preferential loan terms for veteran-owned businesses, financial literacy programs for military families, the works. We're going to show Arthur Grant and the world that First National Bank is committed to serving those who've served our country. As the team began to brainstorm ideas, Lily sat quietly, her earlier embarrassment giving way to a sense of determination. Hesitantly, she raised her hand. Mr. Stevens, I'd like to volunteer to lead this initiative. I made the mistake of dismissing Mr. Grant, and I want to make it right. Michael studied Lily for a moment, seeing not just ambition now, but a genuine desire to correct her error. All right, Lily, this is your chance to show what you're really capable of. Don't let me down. As the meeting continued, plans began to take shape. The PR team worked on crafting a public statement and apology. The legal department began drawing up proposals for veteran-friendly loan programs. The marketing team started conceptualizing a campaign to highlight the bank's renewed focus on community service. Throughout it all, Michael found his perspective shifting. What had started as a scramble to save face and secure a high-value client was evolving into something more. For the first time in years, he was thinking beyond profit margins and market share. He was considering the real impact the bank could have on people's lives. As the day wore on, Michael's office became a hub of frenetic activity. Charts and graphs gave way to community impact assessments. Discussions of market expansion were replaced by debates on how best to serve underrepresented communities. By late afternoon, a plan had taken shape. Michael stood at the head of the conference table, surveying his team. All right, people, here's what we're going to do. Tomorrow morning, Lily and I will personally visit Arthur Grant at his home. We'll deliver our apology in person and present our proposal for the community center and our broader Veterans as Initiative. He paused, making eye contact with each person in the room. But I want to be clear, this isn't just about saving face or securing a client. This is about rediscovering our purpose as a community bank. It's about remembering that our success should be measured, not just in dollars, but in the lives we improve and the communities we help build. As the team nodded in agreement, many of them looking energized in a way they hadn't in years, Michael felt a sense of purpose that had been missing for far too long. The revelation of Arthur Grant's identity had done more than expose a mistake. It had sparked a revolution in the very culture of First National Bank. As the meeting adjourned and people filed out of his office, Michael turned to the window, gazing out at the city below. Somewhere out there was Arthur Grant, a man who had walked into their bank unrecognized, but whose presence had changed everything. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, facing Arthur Grant, apologizing for their short-sightedness, and presenting their new vision It would not be easy. But for the first time in a long while, Michael felt he was steering the bank in the right direction. As night fell over the city, two very different men prepared for the day ahead. In his modest home, Arthur Grant sat at his kitchen table, unaware of the storm he had inadvertently set in motion. And, in his plush office, Michael Stevens put the finishing touches on a plan that he hoped would not only save his bank's reputation, but redefine its very purpose. The stage was set for a confrontation that would challenge assumptions, redefine success, and perhaps bridge the gap between two very different worlds. As the city slept, the true measure of a man, and of an institution, was about to be tested. The morning air was crisp and invigorating, as Michael Stevens and Lily Harper made their way up the narrow path leading to Arthur Grant's modest home. The neighborhood was a far cry from the upscale districts they were accustomed to visiting for business meetings. Here, small houses with well-tended gardens lined quiet streets, and the occasional bark of a dog or laughter of playing children broke the morning stillness. Michael adjusted his tie nervously, feeling oddly out of place in his expensive suit. Beside him, Lily clutched a leather portfolio containing their carefully crafted apology and proposal. The weight of their mission hung heavy between them. As they approached the front door, Michael turned to Lily. "Remember," he said softly, "we're not just here to save face. We're here to listen and learn." Lily nodded, her face a mask of determination. "I understand, Mr. Stevens." Michael raised his hand to knock, but before his knuckles could touch the wood, the door swung open. There stood Arthur Grant, his weathered face creased in a mixture of surprise and something that might have been amusement. "Well," Arthur said, his voice warm but tinged with curiosity, "I certainly wasn't expecting visitors from the bank this morning. To what do I owe the pleasure?" Michael stepped forward, extending his hand. "Mr. Grant, I'm Michael Stevens, CEO of First National Bank. This is Lily Harper. We owe you an apology, sir." Arthur's eyebrows rose slightly, but he stepped back, gesturing for them to enter. "Come in, then. I have a feeling this might be a conversation best had sitting down." The interior of Arthur's home was modest, but immaculately kept. Photos and mementos lined the walls, telling the story of a life rich in experiences and relationships. Michael couldn't help but notice a framed purple heart displayed prominently on the mantel. As they settled into the living room, Arthur fixing them with a steady gaze, Michael felt a sudden urge to dispense with the carefully prepared speech he'd rehearsed. Instead, he found himself speaking from the heart. "Mr. Grant," he began, "yesterday, you came into our bank seeking support for a project close to your heart. You were treated with less respect and consideration than you deserved, and for that, I am truly sorry." Arthur listened silently, his expression unreadable. Michael continued, "We failed to see beyond appearances, to recognize the true measure of the man sitting before us. It's a mistake that's forced us to reevaluate not just our policies, but our entire approach to banking and community service." Lily, who had been silent until now, spoke up. "Mr. Grant, I was the one who handled your application yesterday. I made a terrible mistake in dismissing your request so quickly. I want you to know how deeply sorry I am." Arthur's gaze softened slightly as he looked at Lily. "Thank you for your honesty, young lady. It takes courage to admit to one's mistakes." Michael reached for the portfolio Lily was holding, but Arthur held up a hand. "Before you show me whatever proposal you've brought, I'd like to understand something. What changed between yesterday and today? Surely it's not just because you've discovered my financial status." The question hung in the air, challenging and direct. Michael felt a flush of shame creep up his neck, but he knew honesty was the only path forward. "You're right to ask that, Mr. Grant," Michael said slowly. "The truth is, learning about your background was a wake-up call for us, but it wasn't just about your wealth or status. It forced us to confront how far we'd strayed from our roots as a community bank, how we'd lost sight of the people we're meant to serve." Arthur nodded thoughtfully. "And what about you, Mrs. Harper? What did you learn from this experience?" Lily straightened in her chair, meeting Arthur's gaze directly. I learned that true worth isn't found in a balance sheet or a credit score. I learned that by focusing solely on numbers, I was missing the human stories behind them. Your story, Mr. Grant, and the stories of all the veterans you're trying to help, they matter. They should have mattered to me yesterday, regardless of any financial considerations. A small smile played at the corners of Arthur's mouth. Well said, both of you. Now, let's see this proposal of yours. As Michael and Lily outlined their plans for funding the community center and launching a comprehensive veterans support initiative, Arthur listened attentively, asking pointed questions and offering insights from his years of philanthropic work. When they finished, Arthur leaned back in his chair, silent for a long moment. Finally, he spoke. Your proposal is impressive, and your apology seems sincere. But I have to ask, if I hadn't turned out to be a billionaire, would we be having this conversation? The question struck Michael like a physical blow. He opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again, realizing that any quick answer would ring hollow. Mr. Grant, he said at last, I wish I could say with certainty that we would. But the truth is, your situation has forced us to confront some uncomfortable truths about ourselves and our institution. What I can say is this: regardless of how we got here, we're committed to changing. Your experience has opened our eyes to a whole segment of the community we've been neglecting, and we want to make that right, not just for you, but for all the veterans and everyday citizens who deserve our support. Arthur studied them both for a long moment, his eyes sharp and assessing. Then, to their surprise, he chuckled softly. You know, when I walked into your bank yesterday, I wasn't just seeking a loan. I was conducting a test, one that, initially, you failed spectacularly. Michael and Lily exchanged confused glances. Arthur continued. You see, I've been thinking about where to direct a significant portion of my wealth. I wanted to find a financial institution that truly understood the value of community service, of supporting those who've served our country. I could have walked in there flashing my credentials, but that wouldn't have shown me your true colors. He leaned forward, his voice intense. Banking isn't just about making money. It's about building communities, about giving people the tools they need to create better lives for themselves and their families. It's about seeing the potential in people, not just the figures in their accounts. Michael felt a profound shift in his understanding. He saw now that Arthur Grant wasn't just a potential high-value client. He was a man on a mission, using his wealth and influence to effect real change in the world. Mr. Grant, Michael said, a new resolve in his voice. You're absolutely right. We lost sight of that somewhere along the way. But I promise you, that changes today. Whether you choose to work with us or not, First National Bank will be redefining its mission. We want to be a force for good in this community, to support veterans, small businesses, and everyday citizens in meaningful ways. Arthur nodded slowly, a glimmer of approval in his eyes. That's a noble goal, Mr. Stevens. But remember, actions speak louder than words. I'll be watching with great interest to see how you follow through on these promises. As Michael and Lily prepared to leave, both feeling as though they'd been through a life-changing experience, Arthur had one last thing to say. You know, the true measure of a person, or an institution, isn't in never making mistakes. It's in how those mistakes are acknowledged and corrected. You've taken the first step today. The real test will be in what you do tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that. Walking back down the path from Arthur's house, Michael and Lily were quiet, each lost in their own thoughts. They had come seeking to make amends and secure a valuable client. They left with a profound new understanding of their role as bankers and as members of a community. The journey ahead would not be easy, changing the culture of an entire institution, redirecting its priorities, and rebuilding trust with the community would take time and effort. But as they reached the car, Michael turned to Lily with a determined smile. Well, he said, we've got our work cut out for us. Are you ready? Lily nodded, her eyes shining with purpose. More than ready, Mr. Stevens. I think we've just been given the opportunity of a lifetime. As they drove back to the bank, both knew that this was more than just a new business strategy. It was the beginning of a transformation, not just for First National Bank, but for themselves as individuals. The true measure of their success would not be in profit margins or market share, but in the lives they touched and the communities they helped build. The lessons learned in Arthur Grant's modest living room would ripple out, touching not just the veterans they sought to help, but every customer who walked through their doors. It was a new dawn for First National Bank, and the light of this realization was only just beginning to spread. The grand opening of the Veterans Community Center was a far cry from the sterile, corporate events that Michael Stevens had grown accustomed to over the years. Instead of champagne and canapes, there was lemonade and home-baked cookies. The air was filled not with the murmur of business deals, but with the laughter of children, the animated conversations of veterans, and the gentle strumming of a guitar in the corner. Michael stood at the edge of the gathering, taking it all in. The center, once just a dream in Arthur Grant's mind, now stood as a testament to what could be achieved when compassion met action. The building itself was modest but welcoming, its walls adorned with artwork created by local veterans. Each room had been carefully designed to meet the diverse needs of the community it served, from counseling offices to job training facilities, from a fully equipped gym to a cozy library. As he watched, Michael caught sight of Lily Harper engaged in an animated conversation with a group of young veterans. Her face was alight with genuine interest as she listened to their stories, occasionally jotting down notes. In the months since their visit to Arthur's home, Lily had thrown herself into the Veterans Initiative with a passion that had surprised everyone, including herself. She had become the driving force behind many of the bank's new community-focused programs. Quite a change from the corporate world, isn't it? Michael turned to find Arthur Grant standing beside him, a knowing smile on his weathered face. "Mr. Grant," Michael greeted him warmly, extending his hand. "I'm glad you could make it. And yes, it's something else entirely." Arthur nodded, his gaze sweeping across the room. "You know, when I first dreamed up this center, I never imagined it would become what it is today. But then again, I never imagined a bank would be at the forefront of making it happen." Michael chuckled softly. "Life has a way of surprising us, doesn't it? I never imagined I'd be here either, but I wouldn't want to be anywhere else." The past few months had been a whirlwind of change for First National Bank. True to their word, Michael and his team had embarked on a comprehensive overhaul of the bank's policies and priorities. The Veterans Initiative was just the beginning. They had launched microloans for small local businesses, financial literacy programs for underserved communities, and partnerships with local schools to teach young people about responsible money management. It hadn't been an easy journey. There had been resistance from some board members, skeptical of the shift away from high-profit ventures. Some employees, too set in their ways, had chosen to leave. But for every challenge, there had been moments of profound satisfaction, like the day they helped a struggling single mother secure a loan to start her own business, or when they partnered with a local shelter to provide financial counseling to homeless individuals. "You've done good work, Michael," Arthur said, interrupting his reverie. "But I hope you know this is just the beginning." Michael nodded solemnly. "I do. And we're committed to seeing it through, not just here, but in every community we serve." As if on cue, a small commotion near the entrance caught their attention. A group of people in business attire entered, looking slightly out of place amidst the casual atmosphere of the center. Michael recognized them immediately, bank executives from across the state, here to see firsthand the impact of First National's new initiatives. "Ah, your guests have arrived," Arthur observed. "Go on, show them around. Let them see what real banking looks like." As Michael moved to greet the newcomers, he felt a sense of pride unlike anything he'd experienced in his corporate career. This wasn't about impressing them with profit margins or market share. This was about showing them the true measure of a bank's success, the lives it touched, the communities it helped build. He led the group through the center, introducing them to veterans who were using the facilities, volunteers who gave their time, and staff members dedicated to making a difference. With each introduction, each story shared, Michael could see the skepticism in the executives, eyes giving way to understanding, and in some cases, genuine enthusiasm. As the tour concluded, one of the executives, a woman named Janet from a bank in the neighboring state, pulled Michael aside. "I have to admit, Stevens," she said, her voice low, "when I heard about what you were doing here, I thought you'd lost your mind. But seeing this, it's incredible. How has it affected your bottom line?" Michael smiled. "Our profits are healthy, Janet, but more importantly, our impact is growing. We're not just making money, we're making a difference. And that's attracting a whole new kind of customer, one who values community as much as we do." As the day wore on, Michael found himself constantly amazed by the sense of community that permeated the center. He watched as veterans of different eras shared stories and offered support to one another. He saw children of military families engaged in art projects, their laughter a balm to the sometimes heavy atmosphere. And through it all, he saw his bank employees, not just Lily, but others who had embraced this new direction, working side by side with the people they were meant to serve. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow through the windows of the center, Michael found himself back where he started, standing next to Arthur Grant. "So," Arthur said, a twinkle in his eye, "do you think you passed the test this time?" Michael laughed, a full, hearty sound that surprised even him. "Mr. Grant, I think I'm finally beginning to understand that the test never ends. Every day, with every decision we make, we have the opportunity to choose community over profit, compassion over convenience. It's not always easy, but it's always worth it." Arthur nodded approvingly. "Well said, my boy. Well said indeed." As they stood there, watching the vibrant community that had formed around them, Michael realized that this center, and everything it represented, was more than just a new direction for his bank. It was a new beginning for him personally, a chance to redefine what success truly meant. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink. But inside the Veterans Community Center, the real brilliance was in the connections being forged, the lives being changed, and the community being strengthened. And at the heart of it all was a bank that had rediscovered its purpose, guided by the wisdom of an unassuming billionaire, and the unwavering commitment of those who had chosen to see beyond the bottom line. As Michael prepared to leave, he took one last look around the center. The corporate world he had known, with its focus on profits and market share, seemed a distant memory. Here, in this place of warmth and genuine human connection, he had found something far more valuable: a sense of purpose, a feeling of truly belonging to a community. "Ready to go, Mr. Stevens?" Lily approached, her eyes bright with excitement for the days to come. Michael smiled, feeling a sense of contentment he hadn't experienced in years. "You know what, Lily? I think I'm finally ready to start. This isn't an ending. It's just the beginning of what banking should be." As they walked out into the cool evening air, the sounds of laughter and conversation from the center fading behind them, Michael knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to prove their commitment to this new way of banking. But for the first time in his career, he was looking forward to facing those challenges, not for the prospect of personal gain, but for the chance to make a real difference in people's lives. The story of First National Bank and Arthur Grant's Veterans Community Center would be told for years to come, not as a tale of corporate success or financial acumen, but as a reminder of the power of compassion, the importance of community, and the true measure of wealth. It was a new chapter for the bank, for its employees, and for the community it served, a chapter filled with hope, purpose, and the promise of a brighter future for all.
Disclaimer: this channel does not support or tolerate any form of discrimination, racism, prejudice, or violation of human rights. The stories presented here are original and created by the author with the aim of promoting reflection, awareness, and dialogue. All content is developed with respect for diversity and the dignity of all people.